In this video, we're going to work through the following problem. It says write a program that will print your name to the screen 1,000 times. The output should look like the following. All right, and so the output, we want the name printed 1,000 times, and also we want those numbered, right, with a number, and the number should increase, right? It should start at 1 and go to 1,000. Okay, so we are going to print out the name, right? It's very easy. We would just have a simple print statement that would accomplish that, and so we'll have a print statement that looks very similar to this, although this is not exactly correct, right? When we run this, it's similar to what we want to repeat over and over again. So this is the statement, right? We want to repeat this statement 1,000 times. All right, and so what we will do is use a loop to do that. And there are 3 kinds of loops in Java, but in this case, right, we know exactly how many times we want the loop repeated. We want it repeated 1,000 times. And so if you know exactly how many times you need it repeated ahead of time, then I usually use a for loop for that. It's not like you can't use the other types, but the for loop is, to me, the easiest one to use when you know how many times it needs to be repeated. All right, so we would use the for keyword, and then inside parentheses, we're going to have 3 statements. And that first statement sets up a variable to use to control the loop. And that variable is going to, here I'm just going to pick I, okay, as the variable, and that's a fairly common choice for a variable that will control the loop. And then we need to give I an initial value. And so I'm just going to go with the number that we're starting with here, and that is a 1, right? So I'm going to make that a 1. And then what will happen is I will get initialized to 1, right? And then we will slowly be increasing the values of I by 1, right? And then repeating this line of code right here, okay? So I need to set up some condition that will make this loop stop, and that is going to be based on this very last number right here. The way I like to set that up is just using less than, and if you use less than, it's going to be I is less than 1,001. The reason why that's so is because of the fact that if you use less than, then if I use less than and I try to use 1,000 as the stopping number, well, then what would happen is that when the value of I is exactly 1,000, this statement, right, would become 1,000 is less than 1,000. That's false, right? So that means when I is 1,000 here, this statement is false, and therefore all of the statements in the loop body will not get executed. It will skip past it and move on in the program, okay? So on the other hand, if I change this to 1,001, then what will happen is when I is 1,000, this statement will become 1,000 is less than 1,001, which is true. And so this statement will get executed, right, for the 1,000th time in that loop. And then if I is increased by 1 to 1,001, then when I is 1,001, this statement is 1,001 is less than 1,001, which is false, right? And so since that becomes false at 1,001, it will skip the loop body and continue to any statements after the loop. All right, and that's exactly what we want. We want 1,000 to be the last time this statement is executed. And now you might say, well, why couldn't you just make this I is less than or equal to 1,000? And you absolutely could do it that way. The thing is moving forward, when we talk about arrays, to me it's just easier to do it this way. And I'm not going to go into the reasons for that until we kind of get to the arrays, but that's why I'm using less than there. All right, in the third statement, right, in the for loop header is what I like to call the updater, right? And this just updates the value of the variable. And this I++, right, what it does, it's basically a shortcut for I equals I plus 1. So you could have that one, I equals I plus 1. then I equals I plus 1 just adds 1 to the current value of I. And so there's a short that's used so often that there is a shortcut that's added to that, right? And it's just I plus plus. So that will take the current value of I, increase it by 1, right? And so that means every time that the loop body gets executed, then it gets increased by 1. So eventually, right, I is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually this statement will become false and the loop will stop, right? All right, if I run it, you can see, right, it does look like that's getting printed over and over again, but the thing is it has the number 1 in front of each statement, which is no good, right? That's not what I want. I want the number to increase, right? And so what I need to do is, the reason why it's staying the same, right, is because of the fact that 1 is inside of the quotes here, right? It's inside the double quotes. So it's staying the same every single time. So what I need to do is not have the 1 in there. And what I need to do is, outside of the quotes, I need to use this variable I. It's changing, right, each time we go through. So what I need to do is to add an I in there like this. And then every time the loop body gets executed, I will have a new value in there. So if I run it now, right, there you go. I can see that those numbers are changing each time I go through the loop. Okay. All right, and you know, you can use this same idea to add other expressions in there as well. If you need to change this value of I, maybe you don't want them to go from 1 to 1,000. Maybe you want to have these all be odd numbers, right? And so that would be starting at 1 and working your way up. So if you did that, you could put some expression, 2 times I minus 1, in there. And you can see that this numbers the statements, right? This goes up by 2, like that. And I get only odd numbers, right? So there's lots of different ways you could change and vary this output to get what you want. All right, that is it on this first example.